Good afternoon. I'm Marta Moreno Vega, creator of Creative Justice Initiative and co-founder of Little Afro. And welcome to a conversation that we're calling The Continuum. And The Continuum is basically in honor of the international celebration and acknowledgement of women of Afro descent, African women, and their children, our children, right? So generally the day is July 25th, but we figured we'd start a little early because the times require that we have conversations, continuing conversations that deal with the issues that are affecting our families, our communities, and our international community. So that I am honored that the sisterhood, when I called out, said yes. And people that I love and adore and trust, who are intelligent women who have helped me grow in my process. So that this conversation, we hope you will replicate at home in your community. So it's not presentations, it is a conversation of issues that are affecting us that we need to be thinking about at this point in time. And understanding that what is today is very different than was maybe 25 years ago, maybe different than 10, maybe different than 5 years ago, maybe different than 6 months ago. And in that process, we need to develop the narrative, the language, the understanding that will protect our families, our children, and our communities going forward. So I have asked each of our participants to identify themselves and say 3 sentences, more or less, of how they want to present themselves to the world. And also, I'm adding a piece. Who walks with us? Because we don't walk alone. When we do what we do, we don't walk alone. So who are those entity spirits, loved ones that walk with us? So I would like to start with our sister from Ana from Brazil. Welcome, Ana. Gracias por estar with us.
Muchas gracias. Es un honor para mí. Yo voy a hablar un poquito en español, un poquito en inglés.
Como tú quieras.
En portuñol. Es un gusto muy grande para mí estar acá con ustedes. Bueno, I am Ana Flávia Magalhães, an African woman, in reference to the thought of Lélia Gonzalez, born in National Territory called Brazil, in Planaltina, in Federal District, a town close to Brasília, the capital of the country. I'm daughter of Sara Ramos Magalhães. I have been an activist in Black and Black women social movements for about 20 years. I'm a woman of Axé, daughter of Oya and Eke, that's it, mother of Oxóssi, and Orisha, widely worship in Brazil, associated with hunting, as prosperity and assertive actions. I would like to say one more words, a little bit more words. I am, in the sense, I have the honor of walking first and foremost with Black women of struggle and faith, such as my Yalorixá, Raio Gomes Odekunde, a leader of Ile Axé, Axaloque Opacuodé, in the territory where I live, and Ekedicinha of Terreiro da Casa Branca in Salvador, Bahia. I walk with a woman who ran Casa Sueli Carneiro in São Paulo. I also walk with Dom Filó and the members of the Women's Nucleus of Cultine, based in Rio de Janeiro, with people who are part of Black Historians Network in Brazil, and especially my sisters, Patrícia Alves Melo and Marilede Almeida. That is just to summarize it. I am only talk about Brazil. Fortunately, as Mara said, I don't walk alone. Being here with you is a kind of sign.
Gracias. Muy obrigada. Mayra, you want to share with us?
Buenas, ashe a todo el mundo. My name is Mayra Santos-Febres, and I am a writer for first and foremost. Mucha gente, a lot of people say that I am an activist, and that I am also, and I am a professor. And one of the most important things for me is to look at that organically. I don't think that if you are an educator, uh, all of a sudden you see that there are needs for books that are not being written yet, have not been written yet. So I write them, and I teach other people to write those books also. And right now I am working in a very important, I didn't know how important it was until now, um, project, uh, and that project is el Centro de Estudios, Investigación y Archivo Virtual Afro at the University of Puerto Rico. I have had to learn from archivists and historians and institution builders a lot in order to be able to configure that project. And I am grateful for the people who have handed uh, apoyos, support in that journey, because I have had to learn very fast. But in order to define who I am and who I walk with, that family, that spiritual and affective family, has grown a lot in the last 4 years. Um, First and foremost, I walk with my ancestors, and the first one is my mother, Mariana Febre Falú, a teacher of Spanish and organizational person in all our community. I guess I learned how to uh, be an educator and an activist from her. She used to teach in the back room of our house. She used to teach all of the give tutorials to all of the children that were growing with us in la cuarta extensión de Country Club Carolina, Puerto Rico, where schools were not particularly good and people were mostly uh, Afro-descendants. So she taught at school and then she taught at home. And she taught me to teach since I was like 5 years old. I was giving tutorials to my peers at the back room of our house since as far as I can remember, teaching them how to read and write all my life. I cannot remember a moment in my life in which we haven't been teaching other people what we learn and the skills that are needed in order to move forward. With Juan Santos Hernandez Ipae, Mariana Febre Ipae, my father was a teacher of history and my mother of Spanish. That's why I write historical novels. It's just something that happened out of living with them. I am also I walk with a family of ancestors that I have been learning their names since the 18th century. And I recently discovered that now that I'm back living here in San Mateo de Cangrejos, that the descendants of my mother, Febres, Mariana Febres, were originally from here, but were dispossessed and they have to move to Los Campos de Carolina. Eh, that place called Monteflores, right next to La Universidad de Sagrado Corazón, was used to be called Montefebres. And I also have learned organizing the virtual archive that my father's real name is Juan de los Santos Hernandez, connected with Pedro Cortijo de los Santos, the founder of San Mateo de Cangrejos in 1763. So as the more I learn, the more people walk with me. And I am a daughter of Oshun. And I also, my madrina, Mercedes Enriquez Ibae, walks with me. And this is, and I walk also towards the future with my son, Lucian Hernandez, and my daughter, Aidara Santana Santos-Febres, a woman, she is daughter of Oya, so she's always fighting. And my son of Obatala. But I also work with 28 interns, student interns that are now part of the Centro de Estudios de Afrodescendencia y Racialidad y Archivo Virtual Afro at the University of Puerto Rico, and that we have been able to recruit in order to do all of our work. And I walk with them because the fight that we have to fight has to be envisioned towards the future, and to to defend that center is also to defend them and their future. So this is who I am, and I am incredibly grateful to be here. And that Miss Martha, as I call her, she doesn't like that I call her Miss Martha, but she has been a teacher and a model to me. Called me for this conversation. Thank you very much for being here. Muchas gracias a todos los hermanos y hermanas que están aquí hoy.
Gracias, we need to come back so that people understand cangrejos and what that community means. So Elizabeth, will you share? Talk about babies growing.
Yes. One of the biggest gifts that my mom, Ibae Digna Garcia, Digna Silvia Garcia, did was dropping me off at the center when I met you, and what a transformative experience that has been, and how that's contributed to my involvement. So I share everybody. Oh my God, sorry about that. Yo vengo de lucha. I am a descendant of extraction, of enslavement, of colonialism. I am an Afro-Indigenous Boricua. My grandmother came from Isabela. She was born to an Indigenous woman in the back of a shack, and came with my grandfather, a Black man from Gawas, where they had to leave because the United States policies were taking up agricultural land and turning it into petrochemical industries, and they moved to the largest slum in the history of Puerto Rico, El Fanguito, in Barrio Obrero, where my grandmother lost 7 of her children to disease and hunger, and came to the United States with what was left. From my father's side, my grandfather comes from Haiti, into Vieques, and then into Carolina. And I am born and raised in an Orisha family, defining myself from the time I was little. I remember my mom said 2 things. She said, 1, you were born with the fist first, coming out first. I don't think anybody can deny that about me. And she also said, you were born very fair, and I want you to know that Black people are your people anywhere they are in the United States, that we are part of a diaspora, and that you are Black. And so as I was growing up, I remember people telling me that I could choose, that I could pass. And for me, passing meant denying my ancestors, my brothers, my sisters, my cousins, my family. And so I have to say honestly that the people who've embraced me and loved me and welcomed me the most have always been Black women all over the United States, where they see me. And that while some people think passing is a good thing, for me, it meant wearing the color of oppression. And so I've taken that very seriously in my life. I work at the intersection of racial justice and climate change. And I honor the mother in that way, all of the mothers, Shun, the fresh waters, the Maya, the ocean, all of the ancestors and all of the Orishas that really represent Mother Earth. I am a movement leader in the climate justice movement across the country and across the global South. And I do think that in terms of who I walk with, I certainly walk with my mother. I walk with my ancestors every single day, um, and um, and I'm really clear about what the future is bringing, and I can see what the future is. And I do think that the answers and how we make it through this political disruption and this climate disruption is by reclaiming our ancestral traditions, by going back to the learnings of our ancestors, the folks that sacrifice, put blood on the ground for us to be able to be here today. We are strong because of them. And so every day I thank them. And I have to remind myself when I feel overwhelmed that my grandmother watched 7 of her children die, that my mother went through things that I can only imagine, and that the education that I have and the opportunities I have because people fought for those, because of movements. And so I honor all of those people who came before me every single day. The work that I do is matriarchal, intergenerational, and leaderful. And that's how I define who I am, because I am someone who is a descendant of struggle. And I am really, really honored to be in your company today, de corazón. Ashe.
Good afternoon. My heart is just like pounding because I'm just so excited to be just in this conversation with these powerful women. My name is Essah Cozett Díaz. I come from women from Liberia, so I'm staying with them. I'm holding them in my heart as we all just talk about our journeys. I was born in Georgia. Raised by my mother, and with my interest of knowing more about Liberian history, learning more also about my Mexican neighbors, I started speaking Spanish, which led me to Puerto Rico, my junior year of college. And I was based in Puerto Rico for about a decade, where I learned with Mayra, where I learned with Marta, where I learned with Marielba, where I learned with so many African descendant women. And I think the crucial time that I moved there was in 2015, where it was like the uno de los primer congreso de Afrodescendencia. And that's when I felt accepted of being an African descendant woman. I understood and I could find connections with people from all over the world. So, and I don't claim myself as an activist either, but I I do recognize that I'm a cultural advocate. I recognize the connections between Liberia, the connection between Puerto Rico, the connection that I'm seeing with the global South and Black and African American people. So my work really focuses and honors and uplifts those stories. So as a writer, as a community organizer, as the founder of Hermanas de Agua, which we collect to share our strategies of self-care, which was taught by, once again, another Black woman, Anana Harris-Paris, who took me under her arms when I moved back to Atlanta after graduation in college. I'm also I'm the project manager at the Center of Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College, based in New York. It is the oldest and largest Puerto Rican archive in the diaspora. And it's just wonderful to see my full circle moment coming from days where I doubted myself of belonging or how do I do this, and to now recognize, know, see, connect, encourage, and inspire so many other people around the world. And that is because some of these women in the room, this women who spiritually are with me, like my grandmother, Kula Tobert, my great-grandmother, Mazina Fambule, thinking about my grandfather, Ephraim Smallwood. These people shaped me and inspired me and encouraged me to keep showing up. My mother, Alice Kamara, as well as my brothers, my sisters all over the world. Like, I couldn't do this without all of the people who have believed in me. And I walk with them every day. I carry them. And I feel like people say that I'm such an inspiration, but I just feel like I'm a reflection of all the wonderful people who have poured into me. And so once again, it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to keep enduring and not giving up, because it is easy to give up. It is easy to fall into all of the distractions and all of the displacements. But however, we rise together and we come together, we get to sit together and learn from one another. And I'm just so blessed to be a part, to be invited, to be seen and to be heard, and hopefully be able to share a little bit more about my story.
Well, let me introduce myself, right? I was born in El Barrio, Manhattan. My mama from Caguas and my father from Loíza. And I think the trigger word for me, Isa, was when you said belonging, right? Because I think that most of our conversations are about belonging as women of color and Black women, and knowing that we're of African descent and carry that with us in our intelligence and in our thinking. My abuela, Loíza, was born in Loíza, and her mother was born in Loíza. And as Melanie Maldonado has helped me with my researching of my family. So now I know why my brother is called Alberto, because we had an uncle that was called Alberto. And that was very important because it shows the continuum, right, of how our parents named us, and not only named us, but wanted to make sure that we were seen because of our names and because of our realities. I always knew I was Black because my mother told me and my daddy told me you were Black. And in New York, that was, at that time, was very important to be clear that you were Black. And the reality that we spoke Spanish, and I must admit that when I came to Puerto Rico, I spoke Spanish. So I'm with you. And when I came the first time at 19 with my mom, my cousin would tell me, "Tú eres americana, tú no eres puertorriqueña." And I was so offended, right? Because all along growing up, my parents had told me, "No, you're Puerto Rican." And when I got to Puerto Rico, it was like, "No, you're not Puerto Rican. Tú eres americana," right? So the process of learning about myself and about the history of my people was key because it wasn't taught in the schools. That wasn't a subject area. Right now, we're hearing all of this sort of move to bring ourselves to the center. And that's critical, because if we don't bring our information and our experiences to the center, it's problematic. Then the other piece, and I go to Elizabeth, right? My abuela was a espiritista, a spiritist. She healed with leaves. She healed with alcoholado, right? We had bottles. She had bottles of alcohol of all different kinds on her window and in the restroom, because that was her healing medicine. So I grew up with healing medicines and little bags of different things on my chest, right, for healing. And it goes back to they worked, right? So that we were in a moment where we're being over medical injected, right? We're being over saturated with synthetic objects to digest. And we're seeing the increase of diseases and that we had not seen before, right? But most important to me, right, in the journey when I decided to delve into Africana studies, because I wanted to better understand my abuela, better understand the traditions in my family, was the opportunity to travel to Nigeria, to travel to Brazil. And I think that if we have to create a school, the school has to have a major component of people traveling and seeing themselves in other areas. Because when I saw people, Mayra Santos in Brazil, I had just initiated into the Yoruba tradition of Cuba, it was like seeing Cuba come alive, right? When I went to Nigeria, it was incredible because many of our stories, many of our experiences, our prayers, our songs had left as a process of enslavement, right? So we were all going back saying, well, we're going back home, right? Because I organized an international conference, bringing about 80 of us travel from different areas practitioners and professors of tradition. And when we got to Africa, we understood that a lot had come with us. That we, people were telling us, no, that you don't, what you have is not real, right? What you have is make believe. But when Mayra, a priestess of Yeampierre, sang to Yeampierre in Abeokuta, when we went to Nigeria, everybody cried. Everybody cried. Men and women just sobbed because they said those songs are no longer sung here. And why am I saying that? Because we are the continuum. People under all kinds of conditions have sustained belief systems, spirituality, song, dance, not as song on the radio that you turn on, but a song that means something, that is healing. Dances that heal. Medicine that heals. And in this moment that we're experiencing these crises, what does it mean that we carry those traditions? And I'd like to address how we carry these traditions and these beliefs and these systems of intelligence, right? These philosophies, because people want to label them folk, right? Folk dance. They're not folk dance. Absolutely not folk dance. If you're looking at a song, they're not folk songs. These are songs that are grounded in meaning, tradition, and the ability of the breath, right, to transform and heal. So let's talk about what you bring with you from what you understand is our past experience into the present.
I really love that question, Marta, because my mom was a curandera, and I remember going to school smelling like all kinds of herbs. But also, I talk a lot about the continuum of leadership. I think it's really important that there are divisions being hoisted on us that are intentional, so that we can't survive this moment that we're in right now. Literally, the Americas have retained. I remember the pataquis, my mom sitting us down and telling us the pataquis as we were growing up. My brother is hijo de Chango, my mom, Chun for 50 years. And we grew up in that. And in the house, there were people from Honduras. There were people from Brazil. There were people coming from all over. And we were learning the songs that went back 1,000 years. But in Nigeria and in Africa, they were becoming so westernized and so colonized that they were coming to the Americas and the Caribbean to learn ancient Yoruba. And literally, we held it without any books, without any computers, with our spirit, we held it down. And so I want to share that because those of us who held it, or our ancestors, were the descendants of enslavement. And so the folks that remained in Mother Africa were not the descendants of enslavement like we were. They were the descendants of colonialism, right? And so the harm is being done across. And so now, as a result of all of this that's available to us, we have the opportunity to engage in conversations that connects us because our bodies remember. It's literally the spirit remembers. And I think that this is central. This conversation is really central to how we're going to be able to navigate our way out of the mess. This disturbance that is being created is an opportunity for reclamation and rebirth. So I love that question. But I want to hear from other
folks. I'd like somebody to pick up on that, the reclaiming, and how do we use that reclamation going forward? Mayra?
Sorry, I think that is precisely what is needed at this moment. Es un momento bien importante para pensar realmente qué son las cosas, what are the things that we hold dear, what are our treasures and our technologies of survival, and to claim them and practice that claim in a way in which we can share it. One of the things that I think that is really important is creative justice. See, the thing is that knowledge was continued in a continuum through songs, through dance, through prayer, through the spoken word that informs how we write and how we think, which is really important, no? Audre Lorde said that you cannot dismantle the owners, ¿verdad? El espacio de los amos with their own tools. So we have to claim back the tools that we have and give them the proper weight that they have. One of the things that I think is really important is to honor the ways in which we produce knowledge, the way in which we produce knowledge. I have been in many, many circumstances and conferences all over the world where I see us quoting, quoting a lot of European and Anglo American thinkers in order to validate what we are trying to say at the end of a 20-minute presentation. I have seen a lot of writers, Black writers in Panama, in Costa Rica, in Puerto Rico, African descent in Europe, that are talking, that do not talk about their experiences in order to validate the way in which they write according to el modelo único, the model of what is supposed to be writing. And I'm not talking about the content. I am talking about the way, no? And what happens when we embrace the way of el modelo único de la modernidad, the civilization, the civilization's only model, which is a colonial model, which is an imperial model, is that we erase the capabilities of our possibilities of thinking in a fractal way, for instance. Um, I think it's really important that we understand that reparations and that organization has to be Afro-diasporic. We have been for too long, practicing Black nationalism all over the place. I mean, Black Panamanians only know about the traditions of Black Panama, or Black Uruguayans only Black Uruguay, or Trinidad, or Puerto Rico, or this or that. But if we remember that we came, all of us, from the same place, then we have the incredible possibilities of connecting with a community that is larger than the ones that we uh, were born in. Entonces, to, to organize, it is absolutely necessary in this particular moment in time to connect diasporically. I don't think that any of us have gotten here to where we are if we haven't been organizing that way. And I also think that if we claim creative justice, uh, uh, and this is really important because most people continue looking at the arts and continue looking at intellectual projection and production as things that are done by privileged people. Like, we Black bougies have the time to sit down and write a book, or think about how to create an academic program, or think about do an institution. But that is an exercise of future thinking, of creating new ways of new platforms and new foundations in which we can grow, so that we claim that possibility to think creatively, to live creatively, and to go back to traditions and move them forward is crucial for us right now. What is happening right now with the massacre of closing down um, centers of investigation, fundings for artists, closing down departments of education, taking away very valuable resources, economic resources, so our people can study at universities, is going to be a big disruption, huge. So, how can we continue fighting this fight is, I think it has to be with the production of more material, more conversations like this, more publications, more archives, more virtual archives, so that we can keep the knowledge alive in order to fortify the continuum.
Yeah, Ana. And
Think
you don't
about
raise your hand, just jump in. We're in the living room. We're in the living room. What's missing is the wine and the cheese. That'll happen.
Yo quiero alcapurria. Y va a
Oh, yeah, capuria, lo que sea. What's missing, but that'll come next time. Ana.
Está bien de queso.
well, think about this month, what this month mobilized in ourselves. I was thinking about Luisa Bairros. Luisa Bairros is an intellectual activist in Brazil, now well remembered among us, as we say em português, uma bem lembrada. She said something very interesting in the 60th edition of the Afro-Latin American and Caribbean Women Festival in Brazil in 2013. And I would like to recover it and share with you. She said, I have a great deal of difficulty talking about Black women from this position of victim, oppressed, most exploited, etc., because I no longer believe in it. You can show me all the statistics, and I consult them quite often, and I see Black women in large numbers. They remain in a situation of total disadvantage, but that is not the same as saying that they live in the situation of allowing themselves to be beaten down or defeated by the obstacles placed in their way by society. That's why, even from social disadvantages, we have had and have the conditions to create new directions for our lives. And by creating new directions for our lives, we also create these directions for Black community as a whole. Uh, uh, in tune with Lélia Gonzalez and others Black activists, intellectuals who have been drawing attention to the centrality of Black women in the sustaining Black communities, Luisa Bairros um, reinforced the need of understanding our agency despite um, the many disadvantages. More than that, she drew attention to the dangers of this limiting view, which presuppose our paralysis. In 2000, in 1996, 97, five, she had writing the article "Our Feminisms Revisited," nossos feminismos
Visited
revisited,
that.
in which she replaced the image of domestic works in the history of Brazil. If we do not do this, we will not be able to understand how the rights achieved even by these professional segments are deeply associated with the daily struggle waged by women like Laudelina de Campos Melo. I really want to uh, research about Laudelina de Campos Melo because she was considered the big danger of white women from rich uh, classes. in Brazil during whole 20th century, and in not this, if we don't recognize Laudelina and the complexity of her trajectory as part important to the result of the kindness of of white people who are concentrated in privilege and benefit from our exploitation, we always um, could be um, uh, exposed by the danger of belief in our destructions. I think it's very important to recognize how we can do, because it's not a new action. We are doing this during for generations.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when your citing is absolutely correct, because it brings to mind my mother. Because I always wonder, said, how did she get to be who she was, right? Not going to another country, right? Because she grew up in Caguas, going to El Barrio and managing, right, to survive until she got married, because she met my dad in East Harlem. Um, and how was she able to survive, right, in a situation that was very different from the one she came from? And one of the things that we often forget, and I don't know if we forget, but we don't look at, are the different systems that women developed within community. And now looking at it, I guess from a scholarship point of view, you see that we develop the same thing everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, the women in El Barrio had what they called the sun. They would all get together and put $5, a dollar, 50 cents a week, and at the end of certain periods, somebody would get the pot of money. Another week or another month, somebody would get the pot of money, and so on and so forth. And that's the way she bought a washing machine, because my dad couldn't afford. His work didn't allow us to own a washing machine. But the women themselves, by sharing whatever resources they had, were able to do that. And I think that many of the systems that people want to call or relegate as folklore or quaint are really brilliant systems that we haven't taken the time to grow the way that we should grow them and look at them in a modern context, right? What does it mean if all of us got together, right, and each week donated $10 into a pot? At the end of the year, what would that pot look like? What could it be invested in?
It will be a scholarship for one of my students in Corozal right now. That's what I'm trying to do with this wonderful editorial, this wonderful kid from Naranjito, from Corozal, no, from Corozal, Puerto Rico, Black woman, that she's worried that she wouldn't be able to finish her bachelor's degree. The mother is a bomba singer. The father sells solar systems and cobra por comisión. And she is a brilliant person, but she's scared. And I said, wait a minute, wait, let me activate tu tias. Let me talk to the titis that you don't know that you have. And that way we are finding solutions that are not fighting the Pell Grant, because that will take too long, but that we can activate. And I completely agree with you, Marta. Maybe we have to go back to the pot.
I want to add, just talking about the pot, talking about our bodies and things that have survived and how it's grown. Like, my grandmother was born in Bensonville, Liberia. Her father was actually emancipated in South Carolina and went to Liberia, and they were mixing with the Vai and Pele people. So he left when he was like 29 years old with his wife and 5 kids, and he was a farmer. And the Pele people in Liberia are really known for farmers. My grandma grew up with these different trades, being in the Vai and Pele different groups, indigenous groups, and those practices is what taught her to become a market woman, right? Learning how to sell certain harvests and crops, learning how to having her own block factory, being able to market, being able to afford driving in Monrovia. And so when she comes to America after the coup, after the constant civil wars, what she brought with her was these agricultural skills, these cooking skills, these market skills, these her things that made her savvy. So though she couldn't work because she's undocumented, what she did was she cooked, right? So she would make, like, talking about, like you were saying, Elizabeth, having certain smells on you. I always smell like food because my grandma was always cooking. And so that's how she made her market in America. And also in our garden in Georgia, she planted her collard greens, her potato leaves, right? All these foods that were from Liberia. So when she would go, she would bring it back. And during the pandemic, I was able to reclaim that because I, growing up, didn't feel like I was able enough, right? I feel like I was in her space when I was in the kitchen, or didn't really like to be outside. So I wasn't in the garden. But there was a time where we all got to slow down and we got to start to reclaiming things. And I think when we think about our agency, when we think about things in production, actually growing things with your hand is so empowering. And then to be able to cook that. So cooking, and also being based in Puerto Rico, I didn't have access to a lot of Liberian ingredients. So during the pandemic, I got to talk to my great aunt, who sends me seeds from her garden. And I got to start this practice that was inherited in me that I thought was possibly lost, just as much as she probably did, right? Or her father did when he first got to Liberia. Like, how do we, in our transitions and the ways, whether we think about, yes, the scholarly productions or other cultural productions, what about those healing that happens through food, through meals, and how many people came to our house who were quote unquote refugees or looking for a place to live, and she got to feed them, right? Or she got to help my mother pay bills because of her market, right? Being able to sell fried pepper, being able to make the cassava leaf, potato greens, palm butter, all of these rich meals that when we look at our different connections, they have similar roots. And like when you talk about jollof rice and you talk about jambalaya or arroz mamposteado, all of these connections happen in the comida, like in la cocina, and sometimes because some people don't even have the access to go to school, right? And so there are these conversations that happen, right, when you're being able to learn with your mother, your grandmother, or I often found myself calling my mom while I was in Puerto Rico and just asking her to remember or teach me. And I say all that to say I feel bad because when I was younger, my grandma would always say, go bring your copybook so you can write down these recipes. And I never did it because I was a stubborn child, and you don't think about the important legacies that she was actually trying to, because she was illiterate, she couldn't read and write on her own. She wanted to pass it down. But because I was stubborn in my own way, trying to be a regular Black American and not really embrace certain Liberian traditions at that time, I missed out the opportunity. However, con practice, con tiempo, I'm recognizing this now, and I'm able to do this now. It obviously, unfortunately, it took loss to recognize what you had, but I also think that's very important. The scholarly work that we get to do, because I can write these books, right? I have poems about this, and my work, though it has been based in the Caribbean, definitely leads and looks towards Liberia, because what I learned from Puerto Ricans and from people in Puerto Rico, and actually being in Puerto Rico, allowed me to really tap in and have access to know where my family really came from, or even our survivals of after Hurricane Maria, my mom saying like, wow, you're living like how we lived in the war. So there's things that our bodies go through, whether we recognize it in different formations. However, we have survived. And so whether it's the cooking, whether it's growing a garden, whether it's singing a song, whether it's writing the paper, that there's other types, there's ways that our body remembers, and we have to just kind of pay attention to what feels good or what feels familiar to us, because there's signs. We just got to tap into it a little bit.
So sorry, I'm jumping up and down like a human Daffy Duck right here while listening to you, because that really is at the heart of how we're going to survive recurrent extreme weather events and what's coming. There was an intent to homogenize our experience and to move us away from the things that had value in our relationship with the earth. So Black farmers didn't want to farm because that took them back to the days of the plantation. And it's only recently when they've realized, my God, I have to renew my relationship with the soil, with the land, because that's what's going to feed me, right? And so you've got now people all over Puerto Rico and the United States reclaiming their relationship with the earth and growing things that will sustain them. They're going to need to know how to do that because we don't know how to do anything anymore, right? The things that people did, our families repurposed, reused, they recycled, they did all those things, right? Because to be able to be poor meant that you had to live within your carbon footprint. And so, so about reclaiming those traditions is going to be so necessary for us to be able to survive. We're going to have to live with what we need instead of what we want. And we're going to have to understand that capitalism has a way of moving us away from those things, but also has a way of having insular conversations. So we've benefited from formal education. But if this conversation doesn't translate for Doña Fela on the corner, and she can't make the connection between cogiendo fiao, saving money, compartiendo la leche with her vecina, all the kinds of things that she has had to do to survive generation after generation, then we ourselves will become disconnected from the folks that we come from. And we got to be really careful because it's very insidious and very seductive to become these intellectuals that are separated from the lived experience of the people that we love so much and gave us life. And so it's how we've lost people to the right by that disconnection of language, of what we say. So people say self-care and I say collective care. They say American and I say the US because there are 35 countries in America, right?
Exactly.
So even the words, the language that we use, some people who will try to shame our young people and tell our young people, well, you don't speak Spanish. Well, Spanish is just the language of another slaver, another colonizer. And yeah, I speak too, right? But like, we need to really make that stuff digestible for our communities because the truth is that they have the solutions and they have to believe in their power and they have to walk in their power. And everything that you just described right now was about walking in your power and reclaiming the traditions that made people survive enslavement, in poverty, dire poverty. Marta was talking about how they used us as experiments. They've done it with Hurricane Maria. Do you know Hurricane Katrina is going on 20 years? 20 years in August, Katrina. And 20 years, and if you go to the lower Ninth Ward, you will see that all the development is happening on the white side, and that people in the lower Ninth Ward have no cars, no bodegas, have nothing. They basically took the descendants of extraction and of enslavement, and they neglected them for the last 20 years after watching their bodies floating down a river like we all saw on television. And there's more of that coming. More of that because extreme weather events are here. So everything that Marta said about healing, everything that you said, the stories that Ana, that you shared, everything that you talked about, Mayra, like all of that is central to our ability to come up with what that framework looks like so that people take pride and reclaim traditions that got us to this conversation right now. Because that our power literally lives in this entire conversation. So I just want to share that because I get very excited, as you can tell.
It is. I think it's so important, and we say it and we don't do it.
Yeah, I think people think
that we need to develop a framework that has a value system that is ours, ethics system that is ours, an economic system that is ours. And it doesn't mean that you just drop everything that one has, right? But there has to be a process that we wean away from, that we develop criteria that places us at the center. People that have the spiritual knowledge, people that have the agricultural knowledge, people that have all of these intelligences have to be seen the same as opening a book and reading a book. Because you wouldn't have been able to write the book if you didn't tap the experts that have the content for the book.
Sí, pero yo quiero decir algo which is really important. Miren, En el 2025, I did something that I was supposed to do before. Nosotros teníamos, one day I just wanted to read a novel about Julia de Burgos. Julia de Burgos. Julia de Burgos was really important. This woman was, it's a Puerto Rican that was a campesina and a black woman. Ella misma se definió como una grifa negra. She was the secretary of el Partido Nacionalista, la ala constituyente feminista. She was really important in organizing women who were going to vote for the first time, working class women in the 1935, and I wanted to read a book about her life. There was none written, none.
Sí.
Entonces, there are so many books, and I'm talking about books. I know that knowledge is not just books. I know this. Pero es bien importante that we put that knowledge into a vessel that can withstand time. Nuestros ancestros se van, nuestra gente se queda, and then we are faced in the future with another epistemic colonization, another colonization of the mind, thinking that the only thing that exists is what es lo que los espacios educacionales o media tells us that exists.
Por eso nos quieren quitar los libros.
Exacto. Entonces, but that's another thing. Nosotros tenemos que producir libros. There's so little.
Tenemos que tener los espacios. We have to have the spaces that they can come forward. Right now, books are being censored. Universities are now kowtowing to certain principles that will destroy our history and our stories.
I know.
So the question becomes, how do we protect those stories that get documented and get told? What are the systems, how we're going to preserve them? Because vamos a decir right now, an archive is essential. Of course it's essential. But who controls that archive ultimately?
Us.
If we do control it, because in many instances, they're in institutions that are not going to preserve them or have them in the basement. When I did the first exhibition on Taínos, I had to go to the basement of the Met and the basement of the Natural History to see Taíno objects. Because they censored them from being on the floors and they put them down in the basement. That's the same thing with books. That's the same thing with our heroes and sheroes. So who does that work? That has to be us. But it also has to be in institutions that we control.
Yes.
If we don't control those spaces, I don't care if the library is in somebody's living room and somebody's kitchen. If we don't control those spaces, they're not going to exist.
Yeah.
Ana se está tratando de meter double Dutch, Ana, double Dutch.
Well, I as you said, I have been as a general director of National Archives in Brazil during the last 2 years.
The first woman in 184 years. Black.
It's not a good question because, as I always say, it's the signal that I would have so many problems because this country didn't know how to deal with a person like me, with my thought, my struggle, my life, not in present, but in a perspective of ancestry. But I had been over there. I did a work as someone who has been involved in the archives agenda, especially in community archives. That's it because I understood the urgency of highlighting the importance of memory as an instrument of fighting for equality in the present and in the future. I would say that we must always make time to talk about memory
Mm-hmm.
as a weapon, because I realized that the social movement of Black people in Brazil is always talking about memory, ancestry, but we didn't fight for example, the national policy of archives in Brazil, even among us. Many organizations doesn't have uh, a document organized. It's so hard to fight face it, the hegemony in Brazil, because when we think about memory, as we are talking about how the societies are created sense of uh, us, and we are always out of this sense of us. And
Mm-hmm.
even among us, we have a so abstract idea of ancestry, ancestralidad. Entonces, we must consider the complexity of the lives that preceded us, not only as something static, but as something that's also dynamic, because it is activated from now on.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot lose sight of the fact that in the power games that shaped our education in our memory metrics, we were and are taught to forget what is ours in favor of the affirmation of a male white wealth concentrating protagonism. We need to systematically in tune with the Sankofa principle, update the past and activate the future in the present, as Leda Maria Martins teach us when she invited us to deal with the uh, uh, spiraling, spiraling
Piranha,
time,
the spirit.
spiral
The spiral.
time,
Uh-huh.
uh, something that's part of cosmogony of the Bantu peoples. And
Mm-hmm.
we, within our uh, um, Yoruba traditions, we can recognize as so fast when we think about Exu, Eleguara. Uh, uh, so,
And the Moyumbas. You know,
yeah.
that was the first question. Who walks with you? Is also a way of thinking about time and what we have to do now. Now, how we are a continuum, I mean, now, right now. Y eso es bien importante. No, I think that what Elizabeth says and what Issa has said, of trying very, very difficult concepts um, in a language that is not participant in the logic of domination. O sea, how do we talk? How do we talk and write and do conversations, you know, that are very, very complex? This is a very complex topic, but in a language that can be inclusive, and that is not to show how much, again, you know, the capital, how much have I learned. I don't care about how much have I learned. What I want, I really don't. It's not that important. But the importance is that that doesn't get lost. That what my mother have learned, that what my great grandmother have learned, that what all of us have learned doesn't get lost. So I agree that we have to do it three ways. You know, we have to produce. I am bothering. Actually, my real intention is that I know that Miss Martha has a book that she owes us. I'm after her. I've been after her for a year, saying, Miss Marta, yo sé que la cosa está mala, pero tienes que escribir este libro, caray, no te nos puedes mudar. Yo sé que tú no te vas a ir para ningún lado pronto, pero we need that book, you know? And that is important. And I've done it with Ana Irma Rivera Lacen, one of our most powerful politicians and activists in Puerto Rico. She has like 4 books that she hasn't finished. Y lo mismo estoy diciendo, yo no estoy hablando de libros qué sé yo, que los publique Harvard Press. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about recordings. I'm talking about documentation. I'm talking about photographic books. We have, I'm talking about the New Yorican experience. I grew up in Puerto Rico, but my aunt, la primera, Josefa Febres, I don't know how, she became a lawyer that graduated from Columbia University in 1956. How did he do it? I don't know. Una negrita chiquita, bien, rabiosa. And she became this woman. And she was the one who told me, tú sabes, tú vas a ir a la universidad, carajo, aunque yo no pueda, tenga que vender la toga de Columbia. You know?
Así me decía mami a mí también. Pero yo creo que juntas podemos escribir un libro, pensando en lo que está diciendo Essah, que se llama Recetas para este momento.
Me encanta.
That would be great.
Pero tú sabes qué? I think, and this is something that I'm doing, and I know I am doing it bien por debajo del radar. I'm doing this, I'm going to say it now, pero bien por debajo del radar without nobody knowing me. Actually, I was there right before I came here. We have to think cimarronamente. We have to think like Maroons. We have to think like the people who claimed wasn't waiting for nobody to give them their freedom.
Exactly. And we have to develop a framework of critical thinking that's ours.
Exactly.
Who do we compare ourselves to is always the colonial experience.
And there was another one. Los cimarrones están aquí, estuvieron aquí, and they were, you talked to me about San Mateo de Cangrejos. San Mateo de Cangrejos was founded by Black people.
Yes.
It was founded by Black people. Pedro Cortijo was the captain of las milicias mulatas y eran cimarrón, y él fue el que se vinieron huyendo de otros lugares en las islas del Caribe in 1632 in order to create San Mateo de Cangrejos. We have to start thinking like Maroons. We have to start thinking like maritime Maroons. Tenemos que hacerlo. We have to start it that way. So
and the other thing is, and I think that's where and sorry to interrupt you, the diaspora issue comes in, because we're using it as a label, and we're not saying we need to get together with Brazil. We need to be more involved with St. Croix. Where did the Maroons come from? St. Croix, St. Thomas,
as well as people who went back to Liberia. When we think about like Black nations,
that we don't understand that it's not just being of one island, of one place.
No.
That we reflect, and that's our power. That octopus effect, that we're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we connect in ways that are critical to us?
In 1970 in Brazil, there was something called Quilomboje, which was a connection of Black writers that published themselves for 30 years. For 30 years, there have been circuits of Black population and Black defined publications in Brazil, and there has been some in the United States. And in Puerto Rico, we haven't been able, and in Cuba, there was some. But if we
The
connect,
Harlem Renaissance también is a beautiful example.
see,
So
I know.
that's who we are, multidisciplinary of all different kinds of creative energies, but at the same time about liberation, about race, about culture, about history, about ancestors.
We are multidimensional, Marta. People talk about intersectional. We are multidimensional. We have had to be.
We are like nature. We go like this, like the mycelium of the earth. There's no way.
We're the ceiba.
Mm-hmm.
We're like the baobab and the ceiba tree.
Yes, and we have to be able to create those connections again, but claiming a freedom that nobody has taken away from us ever. I mean, the conditions, and I know that power is power. I know, but there has always been grietas. There has always been fractures. There's always been connections. There has always been. And so to learn from us, the ones that have done this and learn it and put it together. Another thing that I've learned from Brazil and the Harlem Renaissance.
And that was Hannah's point of how we use all that base knowledge. El fundamento, en otras palabras, ¿cómo usamos ese fundamento?
¿Cómo usamos el fundamento? And one of the things that I've learned, there is something called Escuela de Escritores, Escuela de Escritura. That I think is really important, but in our way. In our way. And one of the things that I've seen in Colombia, for instance, is that you get people that want to be writers and you take them to our elders and collect the stories. Mm-hmm. And then from that collection of stories, you create material that is needed for us in any platform. And now it's a bad moment. There's a lot of censorship, but platforms are very, very accessible. So how do we do this? Of course, one person cannot do it, but how do we do it is really important. Here we have translators in 3 languages. We're here. We can write recetas para el futuro in Portuguese, in English, and in Spanish, and maybe in a little bit of Liberian. We can do it. We can do it right now. That's the thing that I think that we have to look at in terms of what we can give.
A mim me gostaria compartilhar uma cosita, porque desde que tivemos quilomboje em Brasil, estávamos tendo outro movimento que é muito importante para mim como historiadora. Bueno, English. Eu estou pensando em Spanish. In 1970s was created a group named Grupo Palmares, where was Oliveira Silveira, a very important poet in Brazil, but he was also very interested in change the metrics of memory and history in Brazil. And it was so important to highlight the importance to think about freedom, because the colonial experience incarcerated our imagination in slavery. Mm-hmm. And if we are in this conversation, if we are in the struggle, it's because we always had the recognition of ancestry and the value of freedom. We are living because we believe in freedom, and we are doing freedom possible. And we need to realize what it is, what it means. Because in Brazil, for example, during the major part of 20th century, we had to struggle against the myth of racial democracy, And in this narrative, we must believe that after the slavery for the major time in America, and a kind of slavery which received the major quantity of African people in slavery, we created a racial democracy in this country in post-emancipation after the abolition. This experience creates an illusion that slavery explains everything, but it's important to say that in Brazil, in the beginning of 19th century, we had the biggest freed and free population of Black African descendant in America, even after Haiti had the revolution. But we cannot speak about how or what this freedom means. Since we start to speak about freedom and recognize the space of racism and not only slavery, we start to recognize how our ancestors are being able to create a future, a possible future. When we speak about recipes for the future, we need to recognize that it's not a event of this present, but we have more experience that we are able to recognize now, because we don't change yet this framework. We are looking for our words with a kind of, I don't know this in English, even in Spanish.
Can I just, I'm going to leave soon because I have to chair a national meeting, but I do want to say something about that, Ana, because of the moment that we're living in, the fascist moment that we're living in, and the cost of liberation for the Haitian people, and what it's meaning for us right now. I am part Haitian, and I try as best I can to rep Haiti hard, because I feel like Haiti doesn't get the love that it deserves. And I know that there has been a cost, a generational cost, for daring to engage in liberation for Haiti. And there will be a cost for us too. And so I don't, my mom used to say, no tapes el cielo con la mano, y no quiero tapar el cielo con la mano. No quiero que nosotros that we pretend que las cosas están suaves, las cosas están bien difíciles y no sabemos lo que nos va a pasar. Se va a requerir we're going to need to be courageous, and we're going to really need to embrace our ancestors and being courageous, and to be able to hold this moment collectively with each other. We're going to need to know how to complement each other and not compete with each other. We're going to have to learn how to move away from an extractive way, capitalist, patriarchal way of thinking about power and community building, and come in as women who, as Black women who have always known how to hold the moment and support each other. We're going to have to pace ourselves. And I think that if we looked on one block, let me just give one example to give some hope, right? If you look at one block and there's an extreme weather event and the first responder doesn't show up, and we know who is on dialysis, who knows CPR, who's a teacher on the block, who knows first aid on the block, who knows self-defense, I feel that we will know and recognize the power that we have among just one community, block by block, that the power is insane. And I think that what we've been conditioned to believe is that we're weak and that we need supports from other people, when in fact, the opposite is true, which is why they're trying to kill us. All right. They're trying to kill us because we know we have the numbers, we're growing, and our power is a threat. And so we need to reclaim that power and not be fearful, but really think about what this moment means in terms of our survival and how we create different economies of scale. And I talked a little bit earlier about living with what we need instead of what we want, because we're going to have to think about cooperatives, and we're going to have to think about other kinds of economic systems, bartering, the things that our ancestors taught us. Because lo que viene es saoco, right? I'm quoting my mama. Lo que viene es saoco y está aquí mismo. So, no quiero que la gente piense que no tienen poder, que no hay soluciones, porque esta conversación básicamente está diciéndole a todo el mundo, nosotros no solamente sabemos, pero nuestros descendientes también sabían lo que es necesario para nosotros poder conquistar este momento político, porque es serio. El propósito es exterminarnos a todos. I don't want to pretend. Quiero, como digo, como a mí decía, tapar el cielo con la mano. And I don't want to leave on a negative note. I want to leave on a power note, that there is a badassery. Like, think about who we are, right? I remember...
sorry about that. People have,
okay?
No, I'm sorry about it if you heard that sound.
Oh, no, that's all good. That's the world.
For people.
That's the world coming in and saying we're here, right? When you think about what our people went through, and where we are, that trajectory, because we're talking about a continuum, that's our story. And when you think where people start from privilege and where they are, that's weak. They don't get from here to there without us, but we're coming from here to there. Right? That's power. That's who we are. And I think we need to remind ourselves that we are those people, and that people like that present a threat.
I think the critical thing is that we have to get that narrative, that language, that mindset in the everyday.
Yes.
We have to get it in the everyday. How do we speak on this situation, and how are we projecting, moving from the situation? Because I think that one of the things that happens, as I said before, and it sounds silly, but it is, how do you eliminate or censor the word woke? This is the language that comes out of East Harlem, that comes out of this young people, right? In the 70s and 80s. And all of a sudden, those words are censored. What is censored in terms of words is us. Us as a people, us as a history, us as a continuum. So that our narrative has to be different. Our meanings have to be different. Right? And we have that because we have wordsmiths. All of us are wordsmiths. Right? And how is it that we continue to use the same framework, the same narrative with the same definitions that exclude and erase us and belittle us and keep us on the margin, or attempt to keep us on the margin, right? Because if we're using that terminology, we're teaching ourselves to belittle, right? And the point of building what we're building, if we're building archives, why are we building them? And where are we building them is my own point, because people say, well, why do you build institutions? Hell, because if we don't have our own institutions, where does that information go? Where does it stay? Who's the keeper of that information? Who sells it, right? Who lets it out? Who doesn't let? And we can do both. It's not either or, it's doing both. We have to build libraries at home. We have to build the sacredness. And that's what I think is so powerful of the candombles. Where are the candombles? In people's backyards, basically. Right? Where are our altars? In our living rooms. Where are our ancestor tables? In our homes. So how does that become, and how does it articulate that concept to the broader community? Right? Because all of our elders have ancestor altars in their homes, but they've been taught to hide them. We've been taught to hide them. We don't hide what is our power.
I just want to thank the commentary of Dalma Llanos, another writer who's here with us today, and that I absolutely adore you, Dalma. Besito. Eh,
Besito.
Dalma has done something really cool um, with her novels. See? And I think that that is an institution building also. Isabel, that we can I have given my kid is now doing some internship somewhere, and she took Dalma's book with her. See, the thing is that we can continue creating these portable possibilities of who we are, of memory, as as weapons of resistance and as tools. And how do we create the spaces for it? How do we create our own spaces? Y yo creo que eso es bien importante. But I will, even I will continue saying it, you know, we have to think of ourselves as the keepers of that memory, and how do we create vessels for we are vessels ourselves, but we have to create and multiply more vessels in order to keep those memories in any which way, in any which way, by doing institutions in ourselves, in our own homes. I am working on that one, by doing institutions and creating tools, maybe very vulnerable tools, but I think that public universities are really important
Oh
institutions
yes, no
to.
question, no question. But it's not either or. It's
No, I got it. Exactly. We have to do it there because that's the way we enter, many of us. I would have never been able to study if it wasn't for a public institution. Like the University of Puerto Rico, que es más blanca que volverlo a decir. Esa gente se cree que es de Salamanca, but we're there since the 70s fighting,
It's
you
not
know, and
either or.
creating this. No, ellos se ponen unas castañuelas a la menor provocación, but we're there, and we have been working at it, and also creating connections with other institutions. And that's why we do La Cumbre Afro, and that's why I'm here, and that's why we create archives of memory, and that's why El Centro is there, and that's why we have to create that. And another thing is that we have to create networks.
Yeah,
Punto. You
Mira,
know,
me
if
tengo que ir,
something that we
tengo
have to do right
que
now is we have to create networks.
I think it's so important to straighten our initiatives because, for example, this time we have in Brazil, Cultini.tv is a kind of archive of videos, audio, visual,
Mm,
is considered the biggest in Latin America, even in the world. And it's a TV channel and a digital archive, which was initiated almost 50 years ago by black activist group, um, leader by Don Filó. If we, for example, this kind of conversation must be uh, done in this space, and Courtney must be recognized. Even Brazil must recognizing diaspora, and diaspora must be recognized Brazil, because we speak Portuguese is so terrible because so often a person who speak Spanish uh, don't understand when we speak only in Portuguese. And we sometimes don't speak in Spanish because it's more important speaking English. We must recognize this connection and straighten our initiative for community archive, publication, poetry, arts, cinema, and everything. And we are doing it because we are not creating something absolutely new. but we need to improve and do it with more consciousness. I for it, I really agree for this invitation, because even with my poor English and Spanish, because I don't use
Not
this
poor, not
language,
poor.
we are doing this conversation. We are keeping these connections. I met Marta. I met Mayra first in Brazil. She doesn't remember, but I remember. Marta, I met in Louisa, and I didn't know. I first I went to her space in New York, and I thought, when I go to Puerto Rico, I need to meet Marta Moreno Vega. Marta Moreno Vega, because Orisha's meeting, many things. And then I was talking about with a lady in Louisa, and when I left, Maria Elba said me, "You are talking about Marta. I can't believe." And then we connected, and we are talking about the possibilities to do a new event about these Yoruba traditions in Africa. It's important, uh, because we need to do with goals more uh, clear, no, because in Portuguese, if I use clear, I associate these words to whiteness, more evident, more focus. Then we are doing just it, because I believe we are honor our ancestors, but we can do more. Just it.
I think that as we sort of come to a close, I want to follow through on Anna's point. Um, what do we look like going forward to do that, Anna? Right? We're saying let's do more. What is that more? What ideas do we have, or concrete ideas that we can work on together moving forward? Because I think that if you have that intention of saying, of doing it, right, and you say this is what we're going to do, it gets done. So what would that look like? And I would like
Um,
to close with each one thinking of what do we look like going forward as a group. And I would
I,
like to encourage people who are listening again, please make groups like this in your living room, in your kitchen, in your park, because it is this energy that we're going to create, seeing each other and not seeing each other and reaching out to each other, that will create the change that we have the power to do.
Mhm.
But it has
first,
to be intentional. It can't be just saying it. It has to be intentional and programmed.
you know, I I started to research about Puerto Rico because I realized that we Brazil and Puerto Rico were the last countries in
Yes,
America to finish
please.
slavery. But more important than it, Brazil and Puerto Rico had
The freest.
big experience of freedom before abolition. And even even after that, our countries created the image. We didn't racial problem, because the racial problem was in United States, or residual from colonization. No, the question is, we are more similar than we thought, and that's it's why in Brazil, the immigration of Puerto Rico was denied in the end of 19th century, because if, in Brazil and Puerto Rico, the white classes know that we are a black countries, and in Brazil they didn't want to improve the black population, so they denied the persons from Puerto Rico. And we need to share, because in Brazil as personas no conocen la cultura afro de Puerto Rico, porque acá solamente recebimos la blanquitud, o los que piensan que son blancos. Es importante romper, quebrar las cadenas que están a cercar nossos ojos, porque yo pienso que hay que reconocer lo que somos en una perspectiva transnacional, porque americana. Entonces, hay que trabajar, por ejemplo, con un depositorio de escritores, de traducciones, de archives, and challenge our capacity of use the language. Because for me, almost 10 years ago, I didn't speak any other language than Portuguese. I just write and read. I started to be with people who demand my speech. I must speak. I must speak. Entonces, si ustedes tienen que hablar con personas que hablan portugués, ustedes van a conocer mejor quién fueron Luísa Barros, Lélia Gonzalez, Laudelina, Oliveira Silveira, Quilomboji,
Conceição
Evaristo, la rede de historiadores negros. Eu estou muito contente em poder começar um projeto com Marielba Torres para traduzir pequenitos textos sobre a cultura afro. Isto poderia ser com muito gosto com ustedes, porque temos muito em comum.
Sim.
Seguro que sim.
A mí me encanta hablar español, no porque yo tengo pasión por el mundo ibero, no. Es porque en este juego de la política, da geopolítica, hablar en español no es algo que es ahora. Por la historia, no es algo muy positivo. Entonces, yo voy a hablar en español more than in English because I want.
Salió ya.
Yo soy de...
Thank you so much, Ana. So if you say the next steps of the small books that you'll be working with?
Yep.
Okay. And then we'll start thinking about the International Yoruba Conference, right? Okay. Good.
To wrap up, what I will do, I'm going to do two things. Yo voy a hacer dos cosas. One of them es defender la Cumbre Afro como un espacio de conexión entre toda la gente del hemisferio y de la diáspora afro en español, en España, en Alemania, en donde sea, y conexión con África. So this is something that I'm going to keep on doing. No sé hasta dónde me dejen, pero yo la voy a defender. Lo segundo que voy a hacer es, en honor a Quilomboye, nosotros empezamos una publicación que se llama Letras Cafres. Y Letras Cafres, yo me puse a mirar, quiero invitar a personas que puedan hacer reflexiones, a publicar, a someter ensayos en Letras Cafres, en todos los idiomas, en español, en inglés, en portugués, brasilero o angolano, en todos nuestros idiomas, para seguir creciendo esa plataforma y darle taller a el equipo de 8 estudiantes graduados y subgraduados que están haciendo edición, traducción y redacción dentro de ese gimnasio, ¿verdad? Editorial. Porque a donde nos queremos mover es a empezar a publicar tanto virtualmente gratuito, que se pueda bajar de descargas en toda la diáspora, porque los libros son, o sea, esa es otra manera en que no nos dejan leer. Y es que le imponen aranceles aduaneros imposibles a ciertos libros y a otros no. Entonces, ahí tenemos un buen, nobody can write a book by themselves. We need an editorial board and a book of translators y redactores, correctores de prueba, emplanadores, diseñadores. A book takes a lot of people in order for it to get published. Así que estoy trabajando en crear el equipo para poder hacer ese trabajo. Una vez Puerto Rico fue el lugar en donde se hacían todas las traducciones de todas las telenovelas y todas las cosas que salían hacia Estados Unidos. We have that power and we are going to use it. Y lo tercero que voy a hacer es apoyar a otras escritoras afro a publicar. To be with them, to do literary coaching. So if any other writer wants to help me with that, I will need some help. Y también estoy trabajando con Tanya Saunders y también con Fernanda Felisberto, que están creando unas editoriales Brasil, Puerto Rico, por eso fue que fui a Brasil y voy a volver, para poder trabajar la integración de Brasil, que es, a mí me parece, uno de los reductos más fuertes de la afrodescendencia en toda nuestra hemisferio. Without them, we are lost. Actually, I'm looking for an honorary or something, citizenship from Brazil, so you let me know, Ana Flavia, porque si hay que salir corriendo, yo quiero coger para allá.
We all do.
I mean, if we have to, and then we'll come back, but
we need to have options.
Good to have options.
We need to have options for real.
Exacto, pero yo no quiero ir a España, yo quiero irme a otro lado. Entonces, nada malo contra los españoles, pero solamente que ese no es mi centro. Entonces, that is what I'm doing. Yeah. Ese es el futuro que yo estoy haciendo porque es realmente donde yo puedo servir mejor. Mm-hmm. And of course, I will do a lot of letters of recommendation so that people get important. Mira esta muerte la risa hice
because me ayudaron también. So
I wrote like 7 for you.
Exactly.
That's another thing that we need to do. No, so that the ones that to keep the door open. To keep the door open.
Lisa?
Yes. I am excited to even just be here, right? Because I believe in the things that y'all saw in me before I saw myself, allowed me to stand where I stand right now. My future looks like continuing to make space for Manos de Agua. It started once again at these small gatherings of us coming together, learning from one another. Though I'm no longer based in Puerto Rico right now, we still have coordinators who are doing monthly workshops, right? And hopefully it would be wonderful to have a center. And Martha, when you talk about being able to own something that's our own, having our own institutions where people can come to be creative, can do their own investigation, that we can travel and be in communication with is very important for me, as well as something that brought up with Ana is like the importance of language. I have made it this far by being able to learn Spanish, right? And then having to learn French because I was on La UP and they're saying, your second language doesn't count. English and Spanish, you need additional language.
Mm.
And then when I went to Brazil, I started practicing Portuguese, and I was like speaking my Portuguese when I was there as well, right? And that importance of language and reclaiming language. And so my next phase of my project is I started talking about oral histories. I started recording Vai with my great aunt so that we can actually have this language, because there's no books. Pele is a little bit documented apparently at the University of Indiana, Indiana University, but Vai isn't documented, and Vai is actually like one of the first and only written script languages in Liberia, and it's a script language, and so it'll be interesting to not only develop a book that we can learn more about Vai and learn how to speak it. Once again, I'm like tapping into my family that we're actually recording it, because we didn't have that connection. We didn't get to speak our language fully at home or to allow us to survive in America, right? Which allowed me to speak Spanish. So creating these connections that we're learning from one another, I get to go back home and apply the things that I've learned from Puerto Rico, right? All of these Afro-descendant gente que me han enseñado, que me han alumbrado los caminos, I think is very important. And I would like to do the same thing for my people in Liberia as well, because we have a history that needs to be shared with the world, and it connects us, right? A lot of people only think about the Black Americans who have returned to Liberia, but a lot of people from the Caribbean and a lot of people from other African countries ended up in Liberia. And so it's important to reclaim those histories. And my goal is to have a center space, whether one in Liberia, one in Atlanta, one in PR, one in New York, right, of doing this connection. And we're learning from each other, because I had the opportunity to go to Ghana to do field work. And that was my first time back in Africa. Right. And that also opened my eyes of that constant, the importance of return. And as you mentioned, Ana, the Sankofa concept of looking back to move forward, I think is very important, because it allowed me to stand where I'm standing. It allowed me to recognize all the things that have possibly been lost, but they're being reclaimed now through these communities, through the wonderful people who I'm connecting with, and also know that the future is not ending right now. It is difficult. It's always been difficult for us, but we always overcome. So my future is bright. It's going to be in community. It's going to be continue to be in spaces where we gather, learn, think, encourage, and empower. I think the empowerment key is what helps me, because there's many days where we feel like we want to give up, but having strong women, having strong people who believe in you, who can see sometimes beyond what we can see, and to be surrounded by that. And so if people can find your people and be vulnerable and be honest about your journeys, that way people can really fully help you. I think once we're honest about who we are, and once people can continue to see our lights, we will shine throughout the world. And so I'm excited about my future. I'm excited about the futures, all the people who I carry with me and walk with me, because I know it's not the end. This is only the beginning.
Well, I'd like to thank you all. And Elizabeth, I'm sorry she had to leave, but she had said so from the beginning. I think that my concern is how we think critically, and the narrative that will express that, a centrality of our aesthetic, about seeing ourselves in the framework of those that came before us and those that we will give birth to going forward, right? As I started, I have two granddaughters, and the promise is that they should have it better, be respected in ways and valued in ways that we all have fought to make a reality, right? And not devalued and erased and marginalized, as increasingly we're seeing, and disrespected in terms of being a woman. So that the kinds of legal actions that are being taken are not only in attitude, but now are being legislated. And we have to be very clear that when things are legislated against you, that means that you should not exist, right? So the question is, if we are to exist, then what is that narrative? What is that action that assures that existence, but also with dignity and with the power of who we are as a people, historically and presently and into the future. So thank you very much. And I'd like to thank those who listened in. But if this has meant anything, it should mean that each and every one of you should get your crew together and have these conversations. Reach out to us as we continue these conversations. and together we will build a better world for us and our children. Thank you.
Ashe, thank you.
Thank you, Ashe.